Hello, fifth graders, and welcome to your math lesson for today. For today, you will need your math resource binder, your 5B textbook, your 5B workbook, paper, and pencil. Go ahead and pause and go get those things if you need to, and then come on back. So fifth graders, at this point, you should be aware that our DDI is coming up here pretty quickly. So today we have some new material. Tomorrow we will be doing a practice DDI. And then we have Wednesday. And then Thursday is going to be the actual test. So again, those of you guys who've been working along with these warm-up problems with your lessons should feel pretty comfortable with the types of things that might appear on the DDI. Remember, Wednesday, if you're wanting to do a little bit of work and connect and try to get a little more review in place for the test, let me know. We can schedule something, okay? So with that in mind, again, these are the types of things that one could see on this upcoming DDI. So go ahead and pause, solve these two problems, and then come on back and see how you did. So remember, fifth graders, when we're adding mixed numbers, we're starting with the whole numbers, right? So 3 and 1, we add 3 plus 1 to get 4, okay? And then we want to consider our fractions and common denominators. So what is the common denominator between 3 and 5? You should have 15, okay? Now we have to find equivalent fractions. So 2/3, we multiply by 5 to get 15ths, so is 10/15ths. And 4/5 is 12/15ths. Then we add just our numerators, right? Our denominators stay the same. So we should have 4 and 22/15ths, but we can't stop there. That is not a proper fraction, okay? So at this point, we need to make it proper, okay? So we take that out. Again, you can do that with division over here. Maybe you can think about it in your head. But we should find 22/15ths as 1 and 7/15ths, so plus 4. Our correct answer is 5 and 7/15ths, okay? Same with subtraction, we start with those whole numbers. So 7 minus 2 is 5, and then we want to consider our common denominator, which is 12, okay? So 1/4 equals 3/12, 2/3 equals 8/12. Okay, and I'm giving you this type of a problem on purpose. We can't subtract straight across, right? 3 minus 8, we can't do. So we're going to make this improper, okay? So 5 times 12 is 60, plus 3 is 63. So we have 63/12 minus 8/12. If you subtracted correctly, you should have 55/12. So now we check, is it proper? Can it be simplified? It is not proper, okay? So we want to make it proper. So again, maybe you did that over here with some division, but you should have found that our proper fraction is 4 and 7/12, which cannot be simplified. So that's our answer. So how did that go, fifth graders? Did you feel okay? Again, this is a good cue, a good checkpoint. If that was difficult or you're feeling like you could use a little more review, touch base with me and we can set something up, okay? All right, so on Friday, we had worked on multiplying by 10, 100, 1,000. And we had some rules for that, okay? So remember those rules, right? When we're multiplying by 10 or 100 or 1,000, we're really just moving that decimal point over, okay? And that's what we worked on throughout our lesson on Friday, right? So when we multiply by 10, all we have to do is move the decimal point 1 to the right. When we multiply by 100, all we have to do is move that decimal point 2 to the right. When we multiply by 1,000, we move that decimal point 3 to the right. And we kind of talked about this idea that multiplying by a number that's greater than 1, that decimal point is going to go to the right, and the number of zeros tells us the number of spaces that it's going to go to the right. Okay, so we're going to apply that rule today with a little bit more to it. Specifically, we're not going to be multiplying by multiples of 10, 100, 1,000. So instead of multiplying by 10, we'll multiply by 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, okay? Or 200, 300, 400, 500, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, okay? So it's going to kind of be building together multiple concepts that we've been working on. So first first, we're just going to break this apart and kind of talk about how we're going to be doing these problems today. So I'm flipping you around. So let's take an example here. Let's say, and this one actually is coming from your textbook, but for now, let's just say we're multiplying 53 hundredths by 40. So what I want you guys to be thinking about is how you can break this number into its two parts, where one of the parts is 10, right? And 10 times what is 40? 10 times 4. So now we've kind of broken this into multiple parts. So starting here, if we multiply by 10, we just reviewed this rule. When we multiply by 10, we move the decimal point 1 to the right. So if we're going to do this first part, we end up with 5 and 3 tenths. So now we're multiplying 5 and 3 tenths times 4. Now, once we get here, you're probably going to want to write it vertically. But again, we know how to do this. This is a process that we know how to do. So 4 times 3 is 12, and we carry that 1. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1 is 21. Remember, we look back at our problem. How many decimal places do we see in the problem? Just the 1. So that's how many we should see in the answer. So what's our correct answer here? 21 and 2 tenths. Okay. Again, you should be working along with me. So let's try something again. Let's try 3 and 4 tenths times 50. So remember, we're breaking this apart into two parts. If you think you're remembering based on what I said before, what do you think? We're going to break it apart into 10 and 5. Now we start here. Remember, anytime we multiply a decimal by 10, we're just going to move that decimal point 1 to the right. So now we have 34 times 5. And we should definitely know how to do this. There's not even a decimal point involved in this one, though. Okay, so 3 times 5, or 4 times 5, excuse me, is 20. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. So our answer is 170. So what we're going to be doing as we're solving these problems is we want to pull out the part that allows us to move the decimal point. Okay, we're going to pull that out, do that step first, and then move on to whatever digit. And in this case, it should be, if you're doing it correctly, it should be a 1-digit number because we're taking out that factor that makes it a multiple of 10 or 100 or 1,000. Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to take a look first at page 25 in your textbook. Okay, so you can get that out and be working along with me. We're going to be focusing on number 6. So again, you're going to work along with me. We'll do a bunch of them together, and then I'll ask you to do a bunch, or a couple at least, on your own. So let's start with 6a. So we're multiplying 6 thousandths times 30. Remember what we worked on. We're going to pull this apart into 10 and 3. And now do this first part first. Multiplying by 10 means that we move our decimal point 1 to the right. So now we should have 6 hundredths times 3, okay? And now we should be able to do this vertical algorithm, right? 6 hundredths times 3. We're going to multiply our non-zero digits. So 6 times 3 is 18. But we can't stop there. We have to look at our problem. So how many decimal places are in the problem? 2. So that's how many need to be in the answer. So we're going to have to add a decimal point there. And then remember, we always want to have some digit to the left of our decimal point. So if there's nothing there, then it should be a 0. Okay, let's try B together. 8 hundredths times 40. So again, we want to break this apart into 10 times 4. And now we can do this first part, which means we're just moving that decimal point 1 to the right. 8/10 times 4, okay? Now we do our multiplication. 4 times 8 is 32. Carry that 3. 4 times 0 is 0, plus 3 is 3. Look at our problem. I see 1 decimal place. So that's how many we need in our answer. So our answer is 3 and 2/10. Let's try C. 9/10 times 50. So again, we want to break this apart into 10 and 5. Let's move that decimal point. So we're multiplying by 10, which means we go 1 to the right. 9/10 times 10 is 9. Now we copy the rest of the problem. This is one we can do in our heads. 9 times 5 is 45. So 45 is our answer here. Okay, let's try D. And then I'm going to let you guys try some on your own. So again, we want to break this apart into its 2 parts. So 10 times 2. Let's take this first step. Multiplying by 10, we move that decimal point 1 to the right. And then copy. So now we have 3 and 2/10 times 2. You might be able to do this in your head, okay? And if not, you can also do it vertically, okay? So with the vertical algorithm, 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. And then we look. How many decimal places are in the problem? 1. So that's how many we need in our answer. All right, 5th graders, I would like you to try 6E and 6F on your own. So pause, try, and then come on back and see how you did. All right, so 6E, 6 and 81/100ths times 70. So we want to break this apart into its 2 parts. 7, oops, I did it wrong. Oh, Miss Burry, boo. 10 and 7, okay. So we start there. We move that decimal point 1 to the right. So now we have 68 and 1/10 times 7. Now, once we get here, we're going to have to write it vertically. That's not going to be one that you're going to be able to do in your head likely. And then just do that multiplication. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 8 is 56. So we write our 6 and carry that 5. 7 times 6 is 42. Plus 5 is 47. So these are the digits that are going to be in our final answer. But remember, we have to look at the problem and figure out where our decimal places go. So we have our decimal point, we have 1 decimal place in our problem. So we should have 1 decimal place in our answer. So our answer should be 476 and 7/10. Let's take a look at F now. So we have 3 and 248,000ths times 60. So again, you should have rewritten it where we pull out that 10 and then save the 6 for the last. So again, this just means we're moving that decimal point 1 to the right. So we have 32 and 48/100ths times 6, which you rewrite and do vertically. 8 times 6, is 48. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 4 is 28. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 2 is 14. 6 times 3 is 18, plus 1 is 19. And then we check our decimal places. There's 2 in the problem. There should be 2 in the answer. 194 and 88/100ths. So 5th graders, remember, I've been talking a lot about checkpoints, right? And so this would be your checkpoint. This would be your first checkpoint is, how did this go? Did that go well? Did you feel okay with it? If so, great. And if not, then that's a great cue to come and see me or another one of your teachers during office hours. Okay, so we're going to go on actually to page 26, and we're going to build off of this idea. Okay, so far we've been doing multiples of 10. Multiples of 100 are going to be just the same, except that we're going to move our decimal point more places over. Okay, so we're going to look at number 12, which asks you to multiply 4 and 203,000ths by 200. So you want to do what we did before. Break it apart into your two factors, so 100 and 2. Now we start with this first portion where we're supposed to be moving that decimal point. It's 100 though, so we're not going 1 to the right. We want to go 2 to the right. So we get this first part done. We end up with 420 and 3/10 times 2. Again, that might be one that you can do in your head, which is great. And if not, we can do it vertically as well, which is also great. So now we just do our multiplication. 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. And then we check. We have one decimal point place in our problem, so we should have one decimal place in our answer. Okay? I'm actually going to make up a new one so we're not doing exactly the same numbers for this next portion. So let's say a multiple of 1,000. So let's say we're doing 5 and 24 hundredths times 3,000. Okay, I'm kind of giving you a curveball, but we can do it. So we're still going to break this apart, 1,000 times 3. And then we want to look at this first portion here. So if we're multiplying that by 1,000, that means we need to move that decimal point 3 spaces to the right, okay? So 1, 2, 3. So this is where we have our curveball, right? Because there's nothing here. But remember, if we're moving it over, this is something we worked on before, if we're moving the decimal point over and there's nothing there, then we fill in that 0. So that means this number is now 5,240 times 3. Okay, and this multiplication, there's no decimals in here. So this is really just working on our vertical algorithm, our vertical multiplication skills. So 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 4 is 12. Carry that 1. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. And 3 times 5 is 15. And of course, we want to add those commas because it helps us to understand or see the amount more quickly. So we have 15,720. So we're going to keep practicing again, some together, some on your own. Back on page 26 in your textbook, specifically looking at the bottom of the page. So we'll do some together and some on your own. You guys know the routine by now, for sure. So 14a, let's start there. So we're multiplying 8 thousandths by 300. So remember, we're going to break this into 100 and 3. Step 1 is to multiply by 100. So when we're multiplying by 100, we go 2 decimal places to the right. We see 2 zeros, so 2 decimal places to the right. So now we have 8/10 times 3. Again, maybe this is something that you are able to do in your head. Great. And if not, we know how to do the vertical multiplication. 8 times 3 is 24. I see 1 decimal place in the answer, or in the problem, so I need to see 1 decimal place in my answer. Okay, let's try 14b together. 12 hundredths times 600. So again, we're rewriting this 100 times 6. We multiply by 100. Okay, we multiply by 100, which means we go 2 decimal places to the right. So now we're multiplying 12 by 6. This should, in theory, be a fact that you have memorized. Okay, so 12 times 6 is 72. Fifth graders, I'd like you to pause. I'd like you to try 14C on your own. Then come on back and see how you did. So we remember that we're going to break this 400 into 2 parts. We're multiplying by 100 first and then by 4. Multiplying by 100 means we move that decimal point, 2 to the right. So we end up with 154 times 4. This one would not be one that you would be able to do in your head, very likely, so you're going to write it vertically. 4 times 4 is 16, carry that 1. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1 is 21. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 2 is 6. So our answer here is 616. Okay, we're going to try again with our thousands, but the process is really exactly the same. We just have more decimal places to move that decimal point over. Okay, so hundredths times 5,000. we're breaking this apart into 1,000 times 5. Good thing I gave you that curveball before, because now you're ready for it from the textbook. So we're multiplying by 1,000, which means we move that decimal point how many spaces to the right? Yeah, 3 to the right. So 1, 2, 3. And we run into that problem because there's nothing here. So what do? Yeah, we add a 0. So this is going to become 30. 30 times 5. This is definitely one we can do in our heads, 5th graders, because 3 times 5 is what? 15. So 30 times 5 should be 150. Okay. Let's try E together. Getting wild, writing sideways. Well, the paper's sideways. I'm not writing sideways. All right, 25 hundredths times 6,000. So again, we're going to multiply by 1,000 first and then by 6. This is our other curveball again, right? So we're going 1, 2, 3 to the right because there are 1, 2, 3 zeros here, which means it's 250 times 6. There are some ways you could think about doing this in your head. Okay, but for sure we can do this vertically. So 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 5 is 30, carry that 3. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 3 is 15. So our answer is 1,500. All right, 5th graders, it is your turn. Go ahead and pause. I want you to try F on your own. Come on back and see how you did. So we should have broken this apart into 1,000 times 4. We're multiplying by 1,000, which means we're moving that decimal point 3 to the right. So 1, 2, 3. You should have ended up with 5,120 times 4. So we do that multiplication. Again, I would say this one would be one you'd want to do vertically. And you should end up with 20,480. So again, I say, how'd you do? This is another checkpoint. So you had some chances to multiply by multiples of 10 and then multiples of 100 and 1,000. So this is a good point to really say, how did it go for me? Did I do well, or did I kind of get frustrated or struggle with that or not really understand, right? And if that's where you're at, that's perfectly fine. Come see me. Come see Mr. Tom Have. Come see any of your teachers who have office hours, and we can work on this a little bit, okay? So checkpoints have come for our lesson. There's a practice attached. So remember, complete the practice and then use that key to check your work. Try to make corrections. If you are unable to make corrections, then you should really, again, come see us. We can talk about those corrections and try and figure out where the errors are happening as you're following the process. When you feel ready, when you've gone through the practice, when you've gone through the lesson, then go ahead and work on page 15 in your workbook. You're going to submit a picture of that, and we'll take a look at it and see where you're at. All right, so let me know, 5th graders, if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing your work.